Hi, everybody. This is Miss Tracy, and I'm coming to you with Chapter 2 of Woof. Couldn't have been more than 30 seconds, Snoozy said one more time. Was it possible he didn't know how to say anything else? Snoozy was turning out to be the kind of human you couldn't help pay attention to. For example, in human world, you've got those who take regular showers and those who don't. Snoozy was of that second type. His smell reminded me of an old hunk of cheese I'd once found at the bottom of a tipped-over trash barrel, only more so. I'd left that hunk of cheese strictly alone because, believe you me, except for one quick taste or possibly two. The tall man in the blue uniform with the badge on his chest gazed down at Snoozy, no longer by the counter at Go Family Fish and Bait, but seated on a stool by a wall display of nasty-looking fish hooks. "Snoozy LaChance," the tall man said. "Yes, sir," said Snoozy. "Thought you left town." "Temporarily, Sheriff. Mrs. Go was kind enough to give me my old job back." "Wouldn't mind a do-over on that one," Grammy said, standing by the sheriff and shooting Snoozy a look I'd never want shot my way. You don't want to be big to make your presence felt. You don't have to be big to make your presence felt in the world. Grammy wasn't much taller than Birdie, although considerably broader, but who wants to mess with her? Not me, amigo. And I had tough guys in my past. Street gangers, for example. A sudden memory from before the dog catcher. A memory I wish I had forgotten. "Sorry, ma'am," Snoozy said. "Did I fall asleep?" "Musta, but it wasn't on purpose." "You want to call that sleeping on the job? Maybe dock my pay." "Totally within your rights. I got no objection. Fact is, I'll dock it myself in case you don't, but not a lot on account of it couldn't have been more." The sheriff held up his hand, making the stop sign. "Say what I think you're about to say one more time, and you'll wake up in an orange jumpsuit." The part about no more... Snoozy suddenly clamped his mouth shut, so I never found out where he was going with this. "Let's take it from the top," the sheriff said, reaching into his pocket for a notebook and pen. "You showed up for your shift at noon, at which point Mrs. Go and Birdie went into town. Was this prize tuna?" "Marlin," Grammy said, her voice raising sharply. "Marlin," the sheriff went on, "hanging in its usual place when you came in?" Snoozy said. Can't say I consciously noticed. Maybe the fish was there and maybe it... Nonsense, Grammy said. Of course Jack was there. He's been there since 1945. The sheriff turned to her. "Well, ma'am, sometimes you get used to something. It fades into the background, and you sort of take it for granted instead of actually seeing it." "Speak for yourself," Grammy said. The sheriff's face was all about features that were hard to miss. Square chin, big nose, bushy eyebrows. All those features seemed to get even more prominent as he looked down at Grammy. That was when Birdie spoke up. "Blackjack was on the wall this morning." Everyone turned to Birdie except for me. All of them took up way more space than she did. I slid myself a little closer to her, pressing lightly against her leg. "You know that for sure?" the sheriff said. Birdie nodded. I felt her fingertips on the back of my neck, just resting there. Fine with me, even better than fine. The sheriff's voice was a lot like his face, big and rough. Now it's got a little gentler. "Was there something in particular that made you look at the fish this morning?" "I don't know," Birdie said, "but I did take a look at Blackjack and noticed it was dusty." No surprise to me. The place smelt pretty dusty, which I'd noticed from the get-go. You could even see dust drifting into the sunbeams that came through a window. A very nice sight. Nice sights can be distracting. When I tuned back in, the sheriff was still looking at Birdie, although now with a smile on his face. A real small one, no teeth showing, and quickly gone, but a smile just the same. "How'd you do in school this year?" he said. "Okay, I guess." "Weren't you in the same class as my son Rory?" "Yeah, he told me that you were smart." "Rory said that?" "Maybe the first thing he's been right about all year." The sheriff glanced at me. Didn't know you had a dog. Search me, Snoozy said, but I wouldn't call him the parish goof-off, more like a parish goof-off. Grammy turned to Snoozy. What in the heaven's name was he doing here? Selling crawfish, ma'am. I bought 2 sacks at the usual price, just like you told me. Lem LaChance had crawfish to sell, Grammy said. 2 35-pound sacks, $1.95 a pound. You pay $1.95 a pound for crawfish, the sheriff said to Grammy. That there's confidential business information, Grammy answered. But you charge over $6. Your point? Grammy and the sheriff exchanged a long, unfriendly look. Whatever was going on seemed pretty confusing to me. Then, just when I was at my most lost, Bertie said the first thing that made sense. Snoozy, does your Uncle Lem smoke cigars? Huh? Because it sure smells cigar-y in here. Grammy, the sheriff, and Snoozy all tipped their noses up towards the ceiling and did some sniffing. Don't smell anything, Grammy said. Same, said the sheriff. Me neither, said Snoozy. And Uncle Lem gave up smoking years ago. Doc's orders. Nobody smells cigar smoke, Bertie said. You must be imagining it, child, said Grammy. Whoa, right there. The air in this place was smelled of many things. Fish, worms, floor wax, human earwax, my own earwax, all just for starters. But cigar smoke was right at the top. I did a quick nose check. The sheriff was the biggest by far, not including of my own, of course, and Snoozy's was surprisingly on the large side, given how small the rest of his features are. Those ears no bigger than shirt buttons. Then came Grammy's, actually a very nicely shaped nose to my way of thinking, pretty much mid-size. Last was Bertie's, the smallest and the only one you'd call beautiful. But why would the smallest nose be the only one that worked? Can't let red herrings distract us, the sheriff said. What? The sheriff couldn't smell the obvious cigar smoke? But out of all the fishy smells going on, he could somehow single out herring? I backed away from him, not so sure he could be trusted. Meanwhile, he was gazing at Snoozy in a way that made Snoozy wriggle a bit on the stool. Snoozy? Yes, boss. I'm not your boss, but you're the law. That doesn't make me your boss. It just gives me the power to slap the cuffs on you. But you're not going to do that, are you? Snoozy said, stuffing his hands in his pockets. I mean, isn't it obvious now? Someone came in here during my very brief nap and heisted Blackjack. Unless, said the sheriff. Unless what? Snoozy said. Put it this way, the sheriff said. Suppose I pay a visit to your Uncle Lem and tell him I hear he's coming into possession of a certain dead fish. You think Uncle Lem stole it? Said Snoozy. With some help. Help? Snoozy spread his hands, one of those human gestures that means they don't have a clue. From who? 6 letters, said the sheriff. Starts with an S and ends with a Y. Starts with an S and ends with a Y. Snoozy's lips moved, but he made no sound, like maybe he was trying the possibilities. Has a Z in it. Z in it, Snoozy said. Starts with an S, ends. Spare me the pain, Grammy said. He means you. Me, said Snoozy. Why would I steal that stupid fish? It's worth zip. Shows what you know, Grammy said. Tourists from up north offered me $300 for it just last year. Yeah, said Snoozy. Didn't know that. He glanced up at the wall where Blackjack had hung. If I was following this story, so complicated, all of a sudden I didn't want to follow it for one single moment more. Does that kind of mood ever come over you? What I wanted to follow was the cigar-y smell, so I did. It led to the door. Bowser, said Burry. Right behind me. What's up? Need to do your business? That was exactly if my business meant tracking cigar smell. I sniffed at the narrow crack under the door. Okay, Bertie said. Hang on. I'll get the rope. Hang on for what? A rope? She was losing me, but no problem, because with a little push from my snout, that old door opened right up and I went out. Are you any good at following smells? If so, you don't need me to explain how. Pretty simple, really. Smells are like paths, except you can't see them. But who would want to, smelling being so much sharper than seeing? You just keep on following the smell path you're on, in this case, the cigar smoke path. It led me past the sheriff's cruiser with the big blue light on top and down the road. Bowser, Bertie ran up behind me. What are you thinking? I turned to her. What was I thinking? For a moment, it wouldn't come to me. Sit, Bertie said. That wasn't it. No way I'd be thinking about sitting. I'd been thinking about cigar smoke. I started to turn back towards the road. Bowser, sit. But I didn't want to sit. And I'm not the kind of dude who just simply sits when any Tom, Dick, or Harry tells me to. Be nice, sit. But this wasn't any Tom, Dick, or Harry. It was Bertie. I sat. She knelt in front of me. What a good boy. She kissed my nose. No one had ever done that before, not in my whole life. I gave her face the very best lick I could. Bertie laughed and slipped the rope around my neck. I didn't mind in the slightest. Well, maybe I did a bit, especially if I thought about it, so I didn't. Nothing easier. We crossed the road. This isn't a busy road, Bowser, she said, but we still look both ways, or something like that. I wasn't really paying attention on account of the fact that I now found myself smack in the middle of the cigar smoke. It led me to the dock that ran alongside the bayou and right to a rusted cleat for tying up boats. There was no boat tied up there at the moment, but what did I find lying on the rough wood on the dock, right by the cleat? If you guessed a cigar butt, ashy at one end and chewed up at the other, you'd be right. It was a pretty big cigar butt, still bore a gold band. This was the end of the smell path. I stood over the cigar butt and barked. What have you got there, Bow? Bertie gazed at the cigar butt, her eyes opening wide. Wow, you believed me. Believed her about what? I wasn't sure, but I liked hearing her say it. Maybe she'd say it again. You believe me. Just off the charts. The bayou made sucking sounds under the dock. And that is the end of chapter 2.